This idea of tension is one that carries over into the designs of each individual tomb. Okay? You notice the sarcophagus here, where the container is rectilinear in its design, but the lid instead is curvilinear. Then reclining on top of the sarcophagus, we have these two so-called allegorical times of the day. The female figure of night here on the left-hand side, and the male figure of day, as in the times of the day, nighttime and daytime. And if you know Michelangelo, you know that all of his artwork becomes a pretense to showcase that male nude form. That even when it's supposed to be female, it's male, and you see that here in the figure of night. I always maintain that if this woman were alive today, she would shoot her plastic surgeon as she walked out of his office, right? Those breasts could not be any more superfluous than what you see here and the way they're attached to that breastplate. And Night is the only one of the figures to have symbols associated with her. Under her left arm, a mask, which is the symbol of deception and fallacy. Under her left shank, we have an owl, right, which is the night bird, and then under her left foot we have a bouquet of poppies, right, this notion of sleep and dreams or what have you. She is older, and you notice her contrapposto position, right, where her lower half is turned in, her upper half is turned out. And everything about Night is then contrasted by her counterpart, Day. He is a male. He is younger. And notice that contrapposto, right, where essentially his upper half is turned in and his lower half is turned out, complementing the position here of Night. And in my personal opinion, Day is the most powerful figure that Michelangelo ever composed and carved. Try to imagine this figure standing up and walking around. He'd be about 9 feet tall and about 4 feet across as well, which makes perfect sense though, because this is 9 to 5. This is the workday, right, when we're at our most productive. Now, why the times of the day? Well, because it represents the passage of time and ultimately why that gentleman, Duke Giuliano de' Medici, is inside that sarcophagus, right? In other words, time runs out for all of us and essentially claims us as victims. And we look at the figure there of Giuliano, who is sitting up. And this in and of itself is a revolution because most medieval funerary statuary showed the deceased lying down. Here instead, his greatness, the memory of him amongst the living is what keeps him alive. And he's dressed in Roman armor, right? About to jump out of that niche at any moment. But if you look carefully at the breastplate of Giuliano, this weird little grotesque face with these long whiskers and these big ears, which is supposed to represent a mouse. Okay, now why would there be a mouse on Giuliano's armor? And the answer is because one of the poetic inspirations for all of this art was in fact a poem written by Michelangelo's second favorite poet. Okay? His favorite poet was Dante, his second was Petrarch. And the name of the poem is The Triumph of Time, in which Petrarch says that fame can conquer death, right? We stay alive with the memories of the living, but that ultimately time will conquer fame. Sooner or later, the book that describes your great achievements will be lost or burned. Sooner or later, that monument that celebrates you will crumble to the ground. And the symbol that Petrarch used for time was the mouse that nibbles away and inevitably can cause the greatest of buildings to come crashing down, just like time can take down the greatest of men. Now you're looking at Giuliano and thinking, why have I never heard of this man before? And the answer is because historically he really was a no one. Right? The most fortunate thing that ever happened to Giuliano was being born the son of Lorenzo il Magnifico, the younger brother of Pope Leo X. So why does he look so grand? The answer, that's why you hire Michelangelo to design and carve your tomb. If everything on that side of the room was about the active times of the day, night and day, this energetic figure of the Duke jumping out of the niche, everything about this side of the room is instead passive, right? We have the twilight times of the day. We have the female figure of Aurora, or dawn. And everything about her is opposite her female counterpart to the other side. She is younger, right? Her contrapposto is more open. Dare we say she looked almost effeminate, right? And that's about as good as Michelangelo's going to get. And the reason is because in the Renaissance, the passive was associated with the feminine, the active with the male. So the more feminine she looks, the more passive she looks, the more appropriate she is to her twilight time. And everything about Aurora is opposite her male counterpart, crepuscolo, or dusk. He's a man, okay? And look at his contrapposto as his right leg falls over his left leg, hers instead was bending back. And everything about crepuscolo is opposite his male counterpart to the other side. He is older, he is smaller, he's less muscular, and his contrapposto is more open. All right, so this is Michelangelo literally choreographing every last detail in this room, not just the architecture, but the decoration that goes inside to continue this notion of tension and contrast. And then sitting up above, we have the figure of Lorenzo. And that pose might ring a bell. You notice that he looks very much like Rodin's thinker, right? Engaged in contemplation. And just when you start to think he looks a little too contemplative, notice his left elbow resting on that long rectangular money box upon which we have our little mousy friend again. And so that symbol of the mouse marking essentially these statues with death, and that Lorenzo, in fact, was also dead, regardless of how philosophical he may appear in the piece.